leverage the data that's already out there. And like I said earlier, don't try and fix what's not broken. There's already people that are top performers. There's a reason they're top performers in any given market. Take what they're doing well and just replicate that, add your own special sauce to it.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Listen, if you're enjoying this show, do us one quick little favor, but a big favor. Leave us a rating and review. We want to hear what you love about the show, but also get some feedback on anything we can do to make it harder for your investing goals. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Michael Elefante. Michael Elefante is a real estate investor, content creator, and entrepreneur. Now, he and his wife became financially free at the age of 27, just 1 year after investing in short-term rentals. 2.5 years later, they scaled to 6 short-term rentals that generate over $80,000 per month and $40,000 to $50,000 of cash flow per month. Now, Michael is an avid online educator and sells a variety of resources to help others jumpstart their journey to financial freedom. He's the founder of Bnb Investor Academy, which launched in April 2021 and has already generated $1 million in course and coaching sales. Let's welcome to the show, Michael Elefante.
John, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, Michael, it's great to have you on the show. I went over your bio at a very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah, for sure. So I think since I filled that bio out, we've actually officially launched our 7th property, which is our biggest one yet. They're all short-term rentals to date. Considering doing some multifamily and some other commercial real estate activities in the near future as well, which is why I'm excited to chat with you today. But yeah, I live in Greenville, South Carolina, kind of stumbled into short-term rentals, just seeking financial freedom. And my wife and I did not particularly enjoy our sales careers before. So we're like, what is like the highest possible cash flowing asset that we can invest in? Like, what is the fastest way to hit financial freedom? And we just picked short-term rentals. It was something that we understood, and we knew we could really maximize the revenue and cash flow by creating or crafting an awesome experience for travelers in particular markets. So we really honed in on a very specific niche strategy, which panned out quite well. And we're grateful that we finally took that leap. So yeah, today we have 7, and they'll do well north of $1 million this year in revenue. And yeah, just the content thing just kind of stumbled into that too. I learned so much from YouTube and then eventually short form content. I really was just looking to share my personal experience and growth in real estate within short-term rentals, and hold myself accountable to, continued education, if you will, for my own sake. And then I think people resonated with the transparency and some of like the background and for like the juicy information, like here's how much this specific property in this market cash flowed like this last month. So those types of details helped me garner quite a bit of a following, and that just snowballed over time and eventually grew into building programs for people just to help them jumpstart their own investing career. So yeah, it's been quite a couple of years, but yeah, it's glad to be here.
Well, congrats on that early success. You mentioned that you're in Greenville. You've got 7 short-term Airbnbs or short-term rentals right now. Where are they located? Are they all in Greenville, or are they in different markets?
So 2 are in Nashville, Tennessee. 2 are in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee and Gatlinburg. And then we have 2 down in Fort Lauderdale. The reason we picked Fort Lauderdale, it kind of gave us a reverse seasonality between that and Nashville and Gatlinburg. So Fort Lauderdale is the further south you go in Florida, all the way up to the Keys. They start to get busier during the winter and early spring, and slower during the summer and early fall, which is inverse to that of a lot of Tennessee markets. And the most recent one is in Asheville, North Carolina. So one of the popular tourist destinations and like wedding hotspot for all of the Carolinas to go to in the mountains there.
All right. So I think we're starting to get some of those insights right off the rip, right? So you mentioned that you've got 2 in kind of Fort Lauderdale, 2 in Nashville, 2 in the Smoky Mountains. And a part of that strategy there was recognizing the seasonality of those locations, right? So Florida is going to be, maybe hot when some of these other markets are just okay, or maybe it's off season for them, and then vice versa. So that way you have more of a consistent base of revenue, as opposed to only having property in the Smoky Mountains, which has its peak season, but then the off season, maybe you're a little bit, lighter on cash flow, and it's a little bit harder for you to manage other costs. One, how long did it take you to kind of recognize that and to kind of build into the seasonality when it comes to short-term rentals?
For sure. Yeah. So when you're evaluating a market, there's so much data and information out there on sites like AirDNA, Airbidic, some of these other data analytics tools. And they have historical and future looking information to show you what trending occupancy rates are, seasonality, daily rates, and you could even filter by zip code, size property. So that information is incredibly useful. It's almost democratized the short term rental investing space where you don't have to have crazy insights or network within a market that you're unfamiliar with because you could just go online and pull all the data right there for you. So I already knew what the seasonality looked like in both Nashville and Gatlinburg, and that it's really just slow January, February, and then May is awkwardly slow, believe it or not. So those 3 months in those markets, I was like, you know what, it'd be great if we could, in future years, because we had already been through 2 full seasons before getting our Fort Lauderdale properties. If we could add cash flow during January, February, and then, increase the cash flow in some of those other months that all the seasons are busy, that's just going to be a huge bonus. But yeah, you're right. As far as like cash flow management, it was more of like a nice to have, not necessarily a necessity. But yeah, you have to be wary of the seasonality of any market that you're investing in, because if you're investing in long-term rentals or multifamily, you don't really have that as big of swings in revenue or cash flow as you do. It's a little bit easier to control from that perspective. So yeah, you definitely want to budget for that ahead of time, any downside or slow season, but then you can always diversify into other markets to kind of offset that.
Yeah, and was Nashville the first rental, or was that the Smoky Mountains?
It was Nashville.
Nashville. Okay, so talk to us about that first investment, right? You talked about you and your wife not really loving your sales career, trying to figure out what you can do. You land on short-term rentals. You decide on Nashville. Walk us through that process. I mean, one, why Nashville for that first investment, considering that you do live in Greenville? But then also, what was that process like? You just go on MLS, find a property, buy it. What was that process like?
Yeah, for sure. So we connected with a realtor. I was actually looking in the Smokies first, and then where I was looking simultaneously Nashville and Gatlinburg. And a realtor had sent me a property that was a new build that was purchased by somebody, and then before they decided to do anything with it, they just saw the market uptick a little bit, and they decided to sell. So brand new property. It had a rooftop patio, which we knew we wanted in Nashville. It's popular with a lot of bachelorette and bachelor parties, special occasions, like very heavy weekend travel. So those were the travelers we were catering to, our people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s that are looking to come to have a great time. And we did a 15% down conventional investment loan. The purchase price was $495,000. And the thing that got me, though, was I didn't know how to budget appropriately to furnish a property completely from scratch at that point in time, because it was our first one. So we had just enough money to get the house, do closing costs, and set up a little bit. I was like, oh my gosh, we need like an extra 10 or 20 grand to help furnish this place. So I sold my truck that I just finished paying off. It was like a dream truck, bought it while I was in Texas. And we lived at Nashville in the time. So it was an easier market to just kind of navigate before moving to Greenville. So just another answer to your question.
So you were living in Nashville when you bought
That's
this
right.
property?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was easy, but part of the reason we chose it is we could see the tourism like firsthand.
Yeah,
it is bonkers. So just to give your listeners a little bit more insight too, there's two different markets. So you have vacation markets and urban markets, so cities. Vacation markets, are always going to have tourism. You want to pay attention to the growth in that tourism, the growth in the supply, and make sure that it's a sustainable market to invest in. Cities like Nashville, you want to look at not just tourism and growth in tourism, but also growth of population, capital investment from businesses. Like, why are people moving there? Is that growth going to continue to go? So beyond just the cash flow, is it a sustainable investment? Another thing that we looked at for all of our properties is a unique way to stand out. So in Nashville, particularly, if you go around town on a weekend, there's lines around buildings of like hundreds of people. They want to take a photo with one mural, with like an interactive mural. So some of the big ones that like celebrities have done and now everyone wants to do it is like ones with these giant wings on the side of a building. We're like, what if we can bring that in the living room of our rental? And then coin it and kind of make it its own little thing. So worked with the local mural artist and put giant butterfly wings and called it Butterfly Bnb with Nashville written above it. It creates a photo moment, free marketing, because everyone's going to take a photo and post it on Instagram. And their friends will be like, "Well, where'd you stay? I'm going to go to Nashville. I want to stay there." So it's proved to work well. And so we did that. And yeah, I mean, it's just kind of the rest is history. We started to figure out different ways to stand out in each market that we invested in.
I think some great insights there. First of all, you were in Nashville at the time, so you were looking in your backyard while still looking at Smoky Mountains. came across a deal, and you knew exactly the kind of people you wanted to rent to, right? Bachelorette parties coming in, 20 somethings coming in with a small group. That's who you wanted to focus on. But you also knew that they were all about experiences, whether it be kind of the big wings, which I know exactly what you're talking about. Instead of them doing that, well, now they can get it, not just instead of, but you created or recreated that experience into the short-term rental. So now they can get there, take a cool picture, and they're going to help your marketing, because they're going to post that on Instagram. They're going to push that out there to other people. And now you're going to get more and more people who specifically want to stay in your unit, as opposed to maybe a comparable unit that is either in the same building or nearby or whatever the case may be. So I think that's a really good insight about building that experience. And let's stick there for a second, because I think that's one of the big differences when it comes to short-term rentals. People stay at a short-term rental because they do want a different kind of experience. Otherwise, they just get a hotel room, right? Why not just get a hotel room or just rent a house and call it a day? But they're staying in this short-term rental to have a different experience. Just talk to us a little bit more about the psyche of that traveler. You started talking about, the tourist destinations versus the urban cities. Talk to us a little bit more about the psyche of that traveler.
Yeah, so each destination is going to have, a different reason that people are visiting for. So if I'm looking in South Florida, and again, go on AirDNA, look at this information, look at the top property section. I always start there. Location is going to be critical regardless of where you are. If you're in the mountains, the beach, the city, people want to be close to the other activities that they're going to be doing while outside the property. So you need to be in a good proximity to that. The next thing is the different size property. What size groups are coming? If you're going to be in a place in Disney, if you don't want to compete with the resorts, you have to get a bigger property, because that's where the bigger families and groups are going to go to. Next, if you're in a Florida market, for example, do you need a pool? Do all the top properties already have pools? Do they have outdoor kitchens, pergolas, putting greens? Notice what those properties have in common. You can kind of jot down the different themes you see, and then you don't have to fix what's not broken. You can kind of just mimic whatever all the other top properties are already doing, be in the same location they're in, and then add your own unique spin to it and have great design, have great photos. And it's really as simple as that. But you do have to pay attention to what other people are doing, and then any unique way that you can stand out yourself. So a couple key ways are accent walls. If you can do interactive murals, that's always a positive. Lighted signs, green walls, things that people want to take a picture in front of, because people are selfish at heart. They want to take that photo. They want the experience for themselves, and they want to show everyone online, look at the place I'm staying in. Like, look at me. It sounds kind of silly, but it's true. And everyone kind of has that cross their mind at some point. So if you can also have an outdoor space, people love to be outside. They want to experience, like you said, John, they want to have things that they don't have every day. So if they're willing to pay for that, if there's a hot tub or a heated pool or whatever it is, they're willing to pay for that experience while they're not in their own home.
I'm writing down a couple notes here, because I think this is fascinating in a couple areas. But to recap what you just said, first of all, you want to take a look at, when you go on AirDNA and some of these websites, take a look at the top performers, right? The top properties are going to be there. What do they have in common? Location. Are they close to key attractions? Are they close to the other things that these guests are going to want to do while they're staying at this property? That's going to help you. What amenities do most of them have? Do they have rooftops? Do they have pools? Do they have outdoor kitchens? Pay attention to all those kind of things, and just copy and paste. Look for something very similar or comparable in the same area or similar area, and try to replicate that. The things that you talked about, what's standing out was great design. You talked about creating some, like, photogenic locations. I don't know what I wrote here. I have a note. Great. It's something with a P. Great photo, maybe?
Photo moments. Yeah. Great outdoor space. If you can do like accent walls, like, design is definitely key. People like unique things, that they don't get at home. That's kind of the moral of the story. That you want to be in the location they want to stay in, and you want to provide the experience that they either see other people have online or they don't get every day at home,
Yeah.
based on the group that they're traveling with. If you're catering to families in a vacation market, you want to have the hot tub, you want to have a fire pit, you want to have, like, a movie room, a game room. Like, think of like building a vacation from a vacation. And if you're able to craft that experience and be in the pocket or proximity to whatever, like you said, the key attractions, you're going to get booked, and at the end of the day, like any business, as short-term rentals gets continuously more competitive, which it is, you don't want to compete on price, because if you compete on price, it's a race to the bottom,
Yeah.
And as the supply goes up, certain people at some point are just not going to be profitable enough. So if you compete on experience, one, you're going to get more bookings. Two, you're going to get better reviews and better prices. And the more positive and quantity of reviews that you have, you're going to start to rank higher in search, and it's just going to perpetuate over time. But as long as you're in that top 20 to 25% of performers, it doesn't matter how many other bad properties come there, because people are still going to be willing to spend the money for the better experience.
Yeah, you talked about great design, great photos, which is what it read. I just didn't. My shorthand is not as good as it used to be in college, even though I had the same issue in college. But great photos, meaning photography, making sure you
Yes.
actually take good photos of the unit so you can share this with other people. But that experience, right? Creating those photo memories or those photo moments, that's key. And I just wrote down that, what we're talking about here is understanding the real currency, and experiences equal currency to this generation, right? We're talking about the experience is what we value. So when we're traveling, we want to take great photos. We want to remember this. We want to share it, right? That social proof is so key, it's so important. We got to share with other people that I had this amazing vacation, this amazing time in Nashville, the Smoky Mountains. And those photos are going to help us do that. And those experiences is what allows you to stand out, to not compete on price. And insight, excuse me, that I would share is, we're talking about short-term rentals, but this is not limited to short-term rentals. If you are an apartment owner, think about how you might be able to replicate some of these things. We talk about the amenities that our apartment communities have. Well, what about creating those photo moments there? Do you have a mural or a place where people want to take photos? Can you create a space where people want to live, or at least want to come by to take pictures because it's just a cool environment? Hotels do this, boutique hotels do this too, right? So how can you create an experience where people want to come, they want to take photos, and they're going to share that with other people because they want them to know this is a part of the experience that they strive for and they're a part of. So I think this is obviously tied to short-term rentals, but the insights certainly go across the board in understanding the way people value experiences. And when you have real estate, you have properties, think about how you can heighten that experience for that guest or for that resident, and that's going to allow you to stand out from a crowded room, and increase your profitability there. Talk to us a little bit more about how you approach that, because you mentioned that you bought the property, you realize you didn't have enough money, you end up selling your truck, but you talked about great design. Is this something that you and your wife have an eye for? Did you hire a designer? How did you come to the conclusion of, putting together this great design and standing out in the marketplace?
Yeah, design is definitely the hardest part. At least for us, it was. We do not have a design bone in my body. Neither my wife, more so than me, but not a ton. So a lot of time spent again on AirDNA, looking at Airbnb, Verbo. What do the top performers have? What aesthetics do they have? What types of colors are they using? What types of materials are they using on the furniture? And then we would go to Pinterest and we would just type in what was on our mind, and it would spit out ideas and like different rooms and spaces. And we would just try and go on Wayfair, Amazon, Polly and Bark, these different websites of furniture that we could buy, and just replicate what we saw online. And we got better with each property, I think. But now we outsource to a company that I helped, kind of co-found, called Summer-Led Designs. And the two girls who run the day-to-day there are amazing designers and marketers. And Summer-Led Designs only does vacation rentals, short-term rentals. So the most recent property was set up in Asheville. They designed completely remote, and we just had a team locally do it. So we had to spend very little time. We didn't put a single piece of furniture together, which was amazing. But the design packet they handed off was great, and it was designed like 1920s, like Roaring Twenties themed. So you can outsource a lot of that, which honestly I kind of recommend. It's so competitive at this point. If you feel like you're going to struggle, that is the most time-consuming part of the process, is design and setup. Everything else you can kind of automate quite a bit of. So yeah, if you guys want to see some incredible designs across the US, check out Summer-Led's Instagram page. They're amazing.
I love it, man. Great stuff there. We'll make sure we link to that in our show notes there. Can you talk to us about, kind of the numbers? When you are looking at buying a short-term rental, how do the numbers compare? What are the key things you're paying attention to so you know this is going to be a profitable endeavor?
Yeah, so I like to run a conservative analysis, right? So I'm forecasting cash flow, cash on cash return, total ROI, because it does take more effort to stand up. You're doing furniture, you're doing design, doing all these things, and especially if you self-manage in the back end, you can automate a lot, but it's still hospitality at the end of the day. It's not 100% passive. I want my cash on cash return to be double at least what I would get in a long-term rental investment or the stock market. So my targeted returns are right now with higher interest rates about 18 to 20% as a conservative forecast with upside to do 30 plus. Um, you know, previously I was always shooting for 25%, and we've achieved as high as 100 on certain properties. It's kind of crazy at the upside you can get on these. And then what I like to do is I'll call it stress testing, which I think a lot of good investors should do. Run a low side forecast and then truly see what the upside is. And you could lean into the data on AirDNA and see, okay, what if I'm 5 or 10% less occupied than I actually think I'm going to be? And then on the upside, well, what if I can actually get an extra $50 per night and I'm 5% more occupied than I think I'm going to be? So you can see, like, on a very low end, I want to be around that 7 to 10% range where I'm still getting the ROI that I think I would see in a average long-term rental or the stock market. And then on the upside, again, that 30% plus is kind of what I'm looking for. And you can always see what your break-even point is, right? I mean, you can go down to like zero and see, how poor do I have to perform and what do the properties look like that are performing at that level? And if you're like, oh man, I'm way, way confident that I would not be here, then probably a good deal.
That's a great way to think about it, right? Because especially if it's just you and you don't have like investors that you gotta, deliver a return for. You talk about focusing on the cash on cash return, beating kind of the alternatives, right? Investing in the stock market or maybe a long-term rental, trying to double that. So maybe 18 to 20% is kind of what you're looking at. And I love this notion of kind of stress testing the deal. So what if you're super conservative and you're off by 5-10% on your numbers? What do the returns look like there? What if you're maybe overly confident or the market just doesn't pan out the way you thought it was and you miss your metrics by 10%? What does it look like there? And understanding what's your break even. And that should give you some confidence to say, okay, you know what? My break even is here. And this, and this would need to happen in order for us to hit that. And as I'm looking at the comps and I'm looking at the market, doesn't look like that's really a possibility, or unless something really, really bad happens. And that way you can mitigate your risk and make an informed investing decision. Talk to us more about kind of the back end now. You mentioned that you've got properties in different states. This is the hospitality industry, as you stated. So how are you managing these 7 properties, really in multiple markets across the country?
Yeah. So today, my team actually managed a Home Team Vacation Rentals. My business partner and I co-founded that business back in August of 2022. But up until that point, my wife and I were just self-managing 6 without VAs, just on our own. And there's a couple key pieces of software that enable you to do this, to some extent at scale without hiring anybody else. And by that, I mean, you're spending maybe 30 to 60 minutes a week per property managing. So property management software is the biggest one. That'll enable you to sync your listings if you list on multiple sites: direct booking, Airbnb, Vrbo, booking.com, and will also automate 90% of the guest messaging. So John, if you were to book my place, you'd get welcome instructions, then you'd get check-in instructions, house rules, checkout instructions. It can even auto review guests for you on Airbnb. So that takes away a ton of the nuance there. And then you have a software to use with cleaning, so turnover management. So the last thing you want to be doing is sending screenshots of your calendars to cleaners every week. That's a huge time suck. So if you can automate that, even better. So Turno and Resort Cleaning are probably the 2 most well-known. There's Turnify is another one. There's some other good softwares out there coming up. But I use Turno for most of our properties. And that's great because it'll sync with my iCal links through my property management software or directly with Airbnb and Vrbo. And anytime I get a reservation, cleaners get notified. They have access to the full calendar. They know when to clean, when guest check-in and checkout time is. All that's great. And then the next one is dynamic pricing. So using Price Labs or Wheelhouse are like the 2 leading competitors there. We currently use Price Labs, and you're able to set a whole bunch of customizations. And then Price Labs, similarly to AirDNA, has access to all these listings around the world. So it knows what other comps are priced at. So based on your comps and then based on demand, how frequently they're seeing people book certain days, it'll adjust your pricing for you up or down within your parameters. So that helps you get peak prices during high demand days, and then it'll lower your prices to help you get booked during low demand days. Because a lot of the old legacy PMs, they'll just say, our average daily rate for this property on the beach is $400 a night, and they will leave it at $400 the entire year. And that's a huge mistake because peak season, they may be getting $500 a night if they changed it. During low season, they may not be getting booked, but they would get booked if it was $250 a night. So those 3 tools are the biggest ones I would recommend to people.
No, it's great insights there. And I think those are the kind of things that can make the difference in someone recognizing that, okay, either, hey, it's enough resources for me to get started, but also you're not the first person to run through these challenges of, okay, well, hey, I want to buy a property, but it's in a different state. How do I manage the turnover? How do I manage the guest bookings? How do I manage this? There are a lot of resources available. And I know that you've kind of taken a lot of this information. Some of it I'm sure you have on your social media sites where you have a pretty big following now, over 1 million followers across those platforms. But you also have your course, right? You've got your Airbnb Investor Academy. Talk to us a little bit more about that Investor Academy and some of the things you help investors with.
Yeah, Bnb Investor Academy currently has a whole video course, but it also, more importantly, has 6 months of coaching, very hands-on coaching. We have like 7 going on 8 coaches on staff, and we have legal CPAs, investment coaches, property management coaches. So all across the board, you have tons of support, and like 25 plus coaching calls per month. Then we have client success managers that you can meet with one-on-one as well. But yeah, the biggest thing is just giving people the right blueprint and the right support they need to ensure that they are not missing something when evaluating a market or property. And then once they're under contract, or if they're doing rental arbitrage, once they secure that lease, how do we design it to become hopefully a top performer and compete in that specific market or zip code that you're operating in? And then we help on the back end set up all those tools appropriately, and then maximize, like revenue management. How do we maximize revenue and cash flow from a particular property? And then, of course, the biggest question of all for most people once they get that first one is, all right, this is great, I'm hungry, how do I scale? So then we work with people on the different strategies to scale their business.
There you go. Well, listen, you go to bnbinvestoracademy.com to learn more about that. Let's talk about kind of your social media presence, right? I alluded to the fact that you've got 1 million followers across the different platforms. I know you started by just kind of consuming, information, watching these YouTube videos, and just trying to figure out how in the heck to do it yourself. What kind of led you to pivot and say, okay, let me give back, let me share what I'm doing, and how were you able to kind of amass such a large following?
Yeah, it's kind of a broken methodology that I used at the beginning. I had learned so much on YouTube that all I wanted to do is like try and create YouTube videos that people would find valuable and watch. And my content, video and audio, some other stuff were so poor at the beginning. My content was okay for the most part, but I think I was trying to do too much, like personal finance, stock investing. Eventually narrowed it down to something very specific, short-term rentals. And that's when things started to pick up. It actually never really picked up a ton on YouTube. So I started a little competition with a buddy of mine. Let's post once a day on TikTok to educate people on the real estate stuff. They were trying to drive people to their podcasts, and I was trying to funnel people to YouTube. Completely backwards mindset. I should have looked at TikTok as its own standalone platform that had a ton of potential. So TikTok just accidentally grew because I was sharing like little tidbits of content. It was easier for me just like kind of off the top of my head, share with my investment strategy with people, and started to amass a following there. It did help grow YouTube some, but not a ton. So then I was like, oh, I should focus on short form content because that's what I think I'm better at. People seem to like it. But I think the biggest thing for me was something I always appreciated from other people, like Graham Stephan. The one thing that stuck with me about him was he once in a while would share, here's how much money I made, here's how I did it, and here's what it took. And I was like, oh, okay. Because a lot of people don't share the actual behind the scenes. He probably is making a lot more money than he's even sharing, but at least on the YouTube side of things, he did. I was like, well, what if I just share from like a real estate perspective? Here's how much money I made last month. And here's the exact breakdown of how many nights I was booked, what the property looks like, daily rate, this, that, and the other. And people really like that. A couple of videos got millions of views. So I was like, I could replicate this every month because every month we have a new month and I could do a breakdown. So TikTok grew. And what's crazy about social media, I learned, is that consistency is key. But if you're consistently getting no engagement, like try and pivot and try something else. But once you find out what works, don't pivot and try something else because you're like, oh, I'm a great content creator. I can create anything. Replicate exactly what you just did over and over and over again until it doesn't work anymore. So I think I had like probably less than 10 videos account for like 80 to 90% of my total following. So TikTok, we're almost at 1 million followers. And then Instagram has grown substantially more recently and probably my main platform. And we're at like 275 or 78,000 followers, somewhere in there. And again, there was probably like 4 or 5 pieces of content out of hundreds that I've posted that accounted for 80 to 90% of those followers.
I love the fact that you were really clear in communicating like what worked, right? Like it was the not just short form content, but specifically talking about the numbers because that's what you don't really get in a lot of places. People don't want to share their numbers, but you were breaking down like, hey, here's how much we made this month with our Airbnb properties. And that, I think people understand. I think people can intuitively see how that's going to be interesting and content that people are going to watch and pay attention to and engage with, right? I know that's not the only kind of content you make, right? It sounds like you make that once a month. You make a bunch of other content as well. What is it about the content creation process that you have found that allows you to have success? Is it certain types, not just that type of video, but like, is it, certain other kind of videos? Is it being on site? Is it like, what else really jumps out to you when you're looking to create content?
Yeah, I think people like the storytelling aspect. They like to understand not just the end product, but how the end product was created. So regardless of what that was, if it was real estate investing, for example, you know, people see someone online, wow, I'm doing so well. I got all these properties. It's amazing. Well, how'd you get there? Because it seems so far out of touch from where I am today. So I really try and keep that in mind with people is here's some tips to get started. And, first the juicy hook is this is how much money I made on Airbnb, or this property is going to do this much, or I evaluate someone else's property and talk about here's how much you could make on Airbnb. And I'll just do a dummy evaluation of a property and show how to evaluate it. So I think just like having a good hook and then telling a story and then giving people valuable information along the way is what keeps them engaged. And then you have some of those videos that hit big with the juicier info, and then you have nurture content. So that's for the content that like you're actually providing tons of free value and stuff that usually don't get as much views, but the active followers and the active subscribers are going to go back and look at every single piece of content. That's where the evergreen content comes into play because they're going to go back and dig, and they'll find the videos where you're like, here's how I use the pricing tool that I use. The mass population is not going to care about some pricing tool like that they've never heard of before, but they will care. They're going to like or hate you if you talk about, I made this much money and here's how. But then the people go back and get that nurture content. And that's where they're like, okay, now they're starting to put all the pieces together. I give a lot away for free, like the majority of the recipes for free, which I think helps build a mass following and eventually turns into a valuable coaching business.
I think the thing that's really key in what you're talking about is almost like building a funnel. And at the top of the funnel, and this is marketing funnels, this is marketing 101 stuff, right? But you have to have something broad enough to reach the masses, maybe that casual investor or that casual person who's somewhat interested, but they're not sitting there consuming hours and hours of podcasts and videos and all of that stuff, right? But they're casually interested in, enough to watch this video, right? So you have that kind of stuff that gets people's attention. The person who is very interested, though, they want to learn the business, they want to be an Airbnb investor, or they want to own short-term rentals, they're going to dig deeper. They're going to watch those other videos you create where you're talking more about here are the tools that I use, or here's how I manage this process, because they want to learn. And those are the people who are probably going to end up working with you in some capacity. At a minimum, they're going to be very thankful of the information you've provided. So if there is an opportunity to give back to you or to help you, they're going to be more likely to do that than the person who just wanted to see how much people are making Airbnb, right? So that funnel, I think, is really important to think about. And if you are looking to create content, maybe attract investors for deals, think about it the same way. What kind of content can you create that most people will at least be somewhat interested in? So they may stop to watch or engage with that content. But you also want to have content that is very, helpful and actually educates kind of the audience and helps them get a little bit more context of how to be successful. That may not be as relevant to someone who's not truly focused on that particular investing strategy or whatever it is you're talking about. So a lot of nuances, but I think it's really helpful for people to understand, like, hey, have that flashy thing that, most people would just stop and watch because it's interesting, but also make content that focuses on your core audience and delivers the kind of value that they're looking for.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And in terms of like if you're doing multifamily, you need to raise money or network with other real estate investors, you have to put yourself out there in some way, shape, or form. Whether you're going to like in-person meetups, if you're joining forums or groups online. But if you can create content and then some investor out there who has money that is looking to partner with someone like you would never find you otherwise if they didn't stumble upon your video on like a For You page on TikTok or YouTube or a podcast or whatever it is. So the more valuable content you create and just lets people know and have a call to action too. Like, hey, if you're an investor out there and you're looking to partner on deals, DM me the word investor or whatever it is. Let them know, because people just keep scrolling. Like, oh, that's cool. Keep scrolling. If you give them a call to action and they know, oh, I can reach out to them, they're looking for other investors to partner on. You have to make the world know that that's an option to do so.
And listen, speaking of letting the world know that they can reach out, they can connect with you on Instagram at Elefante6. That's Melefante, the number 6. They can check you out there. And again, your website is Bnb Investor Academy.com. We're going to go to our round of insights. First question here. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for greater success.
Oh, man. It's probably pre-real estate. I think it was back in college, because I was a college athlete. All I wanted to do is play professional baseball, and I didn't make that happen. I had some injuries, but ultimately I probably just wasn't good enough. Maybe I didn't try hard enough, didn't practice, whatever it was. I felt like a failure. And when something that you've poured years of time into comes to a complete halt and stop, you have to pivot. And I felt like a failure at that point in time, but I pivoted into a sales job, entry level, making like $35K a year. And I was like, man, this is it. I felt awful driving home every day, just numb. And so for me, it was just you have to get rid of that complacency feeling and figure out a way to stay hungry and what you ultimately want in life. And that led me on this path of consuming content, information, and books to learn about financial freedom, passive income, real estate. And it just led me on this journey to getting started. For me, it was short-term rentals. For you, it might be multifamily. For you, it could be anything else, investing, crypto, stock market. But I think it was just the failure of, one dream coming to a complete end, and then just having to pivot, but, take my strengths and then just apply it to something else. And then just to never be complacent, and then, one foot after another kind of mentality.
You've given us a few, but give me another digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
For that I personally use in my business that other people
or that you recommend, or either way.
Those are probably the big ones. My advice to people out there, as far as any resource, whether it's me or somebody else, regardless of what you're looking to, find a mentor, free or paid for. It's far better to invest in yourself through time and money than it is to just blindly invest in a stock market or passive investment avenue. The reason I say that, it's Alex Hormozi talks about it a ton. The ROI that you can get on investing $10,000 or $20,000 into a mentorship or yourself can be 10 or 100x. So if you can develop a high income skill or an investment strategy and learn the ropes and eliminate the 10 years it's going to take you to master something in 1 or 2, do it.
Love it. Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Probably Cash Flow Quadrant. And it's not necessarily the best book I've ever read, but it was the one that helped me take the next leap into the investing phase of my life. And I'll give you the biggest takeaway from Cash Flow Quadrant for those that aren't familiar. There's 4 pieces to the quadrant. Of course, you have the employee, self-employed side where you're trading time for money, and then you have the business owner and investor, the BNI side, where your money is working for you, so you can kind of strip away your time from it. The biggest thing in that book or takeaway for me was addressing risk. I was always very risk averse, scared to invest my money in anything. But I was always I can have a nice, safe, secure job and work hard for my money and I'll be good. But then I started to think about what is the long-term effect of that. I'm risking working the rest of my life for a job that I personally didn't enjoy doing, right? That was so risky to me all of a sudden. Now all of a sudden, investing some money, it just melted away. So there's a lot of good nuggets in that book, but for me, that was the biggest takeaway, to transition from the trading time for money to the other side of the quadrant. And I promise you it's worth it. So that's the book I recommend.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Daily habit, I try and move my body every day. Whether that's going for a walk with my wife, my baby, my dogs, or exercising, working out. Some days I fail to do that, but I worked out today. It's been a few days since I did previously, and I have a much clearer mind and headspace from it. It makes you feel better, mind clearer, body healthier, and it will just, every single time I do it, I never regret it. Helps elevate the rest of the things that you do.
Give me your number one insight for short-term rental investing.
The number one thing I can recommend is to leverage the data that's already out there. And like I said earlier, don't try and fix what's not broken. There's already people that are top performers. There's a reason they're top performers in any given market. Take what they're doing well and just replicate that, add your own special sauce to it. But that's the biggest thing that you can do to be successful.
All right, you're out there in Greenville. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Oh, favorite place. Hall's Chop House is really good. I know it's not necessarily like a Greenville staple because Hall's are kind of everywhere, but Hall's is probably one of the top 3 restaurants there that just come to mind. I've been to a few times. It's always good service, good food.
Awesome. Well, listen, I got a lot of great value out of our conversation today, and I know our listeners did too. Talking about how you made that transition from being in the sales role to getting into short-term rentals, you and your wife realizing Nashville's where you were at the time, getting that first place. The clarity, I think, is really what stood out to me. The clarity of your vision, recognizing that you needed to create an experience, creating kind of that mural and having that in the home so people could take pictures and post on Instagram, creating that experience, having great photography, doing those kind of things. And I think for everyone that listened, think about how you can create an experience that elevates, what that guest, that resident is getting when they stay at your property. That's going to be one way to stand out, where you're not competing just on price. You want to compete on experiences. Those experiences are currency, and social proof is what everyone is looking for. So those are the things that stood out to me when you talked about social media, recognizing that you want to have that funnel. You want to have content that appeals to the masses, that makes them either love it or hate it. But you also want to have the really educational content that people who are truly focused on, this business or the industry, they're getting that value. So if you're looking to attract capital from investors, if you're looking to build a portfolio, think about creating the content and recognizing that, 10 to 20% of your content is probably going to make up 80 to 90% of your views or your engagement. So take your time, just keep swinging. And once you find what hits and what works, replicate that and do more of it. My major takeaway from our entire conversation is find what works from someone else and replicate it. That's the best thing you can do when you're looking to create a home, you're looking to create content. Find what works, figure out how to own it, make it your own, but replicate it based on those principles. So again, if anybody wants to learn more, they can go to your website, bnbinvestoracademy.com, and they can follow you on Instagram and take you from 275,000, maybe 275,001 for every person who gets added there. But just go to Elefante 6, and we'll make sure we check you out. And you're about to get a new follower as soon as we hit this up here. And listen, great talking to you. Look forward to staying in touch. And I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, John.